Hello, my loves. Welcome back. I am recording this on YouTube and also for the podcast, and it is a really special episode because this is officially episode 300. I started this podcast back in 2020, and if you've been listening since then, first of all, thank you so much. It genuinely means so much to me that some of you have been here through so many different versions of my life and my business. And if you're watching on YouTube or listening for the first time, hi, I'm Danielle, and I am just so happy you are here. I thought episode 300 would be the perfect opportunity to do a proper reintroduction and just have a heart-to-heart. I want to share my story, where I've been, where I am now, and where I see my life going next. I'm recording this from beautiful Florianopolis, Brazil. My husband and I recently applied for Brazilian citizenship. We have an almost 18-month-old son now, and we're about to leave Brazil and go back to the States. We're buying our first investment property in New York, and next year we're planning to go back to Asia. And when I look at my life now compared to what it looked like 10 years ago, it's mind-blowing. It's so crazy. I've lived so many different lives in between. And so I thought I'd take you all the way back to the beginning. So I was born in China and my parents immigrated. I moved to the United States when I was just 2 years old. I am the daughter of immigrants, and growing up, I think I had a pretty traditional idea of what success was supposed to look like. Do well in school, go to a good college, get a good job, make money, and be financially secure. And that's pretty much exactly what I did and what I worked towards most of my life. I went to Cornell University and studied business. During college, I spent semesters abroad in Italy and Hong Kong, and those semesters completely changed my mindset and my life. I graduated early so I could volunteer and backpack by myself because I was really bitten by the travel bug. That was probably the first time I really started thinking about travel as something I wanted to make a much bigger part of my life. I even had the idea of starting my own travel blog, so that's when it really started. But I already had a job lined up after college, so after that trip, I went straight into corporate finance at Bank of America. And on paper, everything was going exactly according to plan. I had a good corporate job in New York, a salary, benefits, and a pretty clear career path ahead of me. But I remember one specific day looking around at people who were 5, 10 years ahead of me at the office, even 20 years ahead, much more successful. They had their own offices, and asking myself, like, is this really what I want? There was nothing wrong with that life, but I just started realizing it wasn't the life I wanted, and I did not want to be where they were in 10, 20 years time. And if I had stayed on the path, that's where I would be, right? It was like laid out black and white in front of me. The biggest thing for me was travel. And I couldn't imagine spending the rest of my life waiting for weekends and having a limited number of vacation days every year. I wanted to see the world and have more control over my time. So while I was still working, I started the Wanderlover along with a bunch of other side hustles like dropshipping and Amazon FBA because I wanted to figure out if there was a way I could make money online instead. On July 11th, 2017, I quit my job. I definitely didn't have the next 10 years mapped out. I didn't know I would eventually be sitting in Brazil recording episode 300 of my podcast with a husband, a toddler, and an online business, and I really didn't know exactly what was going to happen. I just knew that I wanted to give myself the chance to try something different. Obviously, I was nervous. I had spent my whole life working towards this traditional definition of success, and my parents had worked incredibly hard to give me opportunities and stability. So voluntarily leaving a stable career wasn't necessarily the obvious next step, but I knew I had to try, right? Like I knew I would regret it if I didn't at least try. So at that point, what I wanted most was the ability to travel and have control over my own time. And that's pretty much what happened. Travel became my life for the next several years. I've lived on remote surf islands in big cities. I've spent months at a time in places like Bali, Hawaii, Portugal, Brazil. I met my husband, Rags, and we ended up building this unconventional life together where home was basically wherever we happened to be at the time. And I loved it. I wanted adventure, I wanted to see new countries, I wanted to learn to surf. I loved not knowing where I was going to be 6 months from now. Travel also introduced me to so many people who had completely different ways of living and running their businesses. I met people who weren't following the traditional corporate path at all, and they were still so successful and happy. Like, entrepreneurs oftentimes are the most successful and the most untraditional. It really opened my eyes to the fact that there isn't one correct way to build your life, and you will find your community when you step out of communities that weren't made for you. And while all of this was happening, the Wanderlover was also evolving. In the beginning, everything was travel related. So blogging, Instagram, content creation, photography, brand partnerships, digital products. But then eventually that expanded into courses, coaching, podcasting, building an online education business, and now YouTube. So it definitely wasn't this straight line where I started a business and suddenly everything worked and I had one income stream. I've tried many things that didn't work. I've spent time building on platforms that later changed. I've had really successful launches and then launches that didn't perform the way I wanted them to. I've introduced income streams that weren't aligned. There have been many times where business felt amazing and other times where I questioned what I was doing completely. But over time, I did build an incredible business that I could only have dreamed of in the beginning. I could make money from my laptop, I could choose where I wanted to live, I could structure my own days, and I didn't need to ask someone if I could take 3 weeks off to go somewhere. So the Wanderlover originally started as a way for me to share the life I was living, but eventually people started asking me how I was doing it. How are you making money online? How are you getting brand deals? How did you build your audience? How can I start an online business? That's really how education and coaching became a much bigger part of what I do. I realized I didn't just enjoy sharing my own lifestyle, I really enjoyed helping other people figure out how they could create more freedom in their own lives by making money online. And I think that's an important distinction because I don't think everyone needs to quit their job and travel the world, but that's just what I wanted to do, and making money online enabled me to live my life the way I wanted it to. Your version of freedom might look completely different. And that's ultimately what the Wanderlover Business Academy and a lot of the work I do today is about. It's not about creating my exact life. It's about building income and systems that give you more choices in your own life and let you design a life that you are wildly obsessed with. Then in 2020, I started the Wanderlover podcast during the pandemic. I don't think I ever thought about what episode 300 would look like. I just kept recording week after week without fail. I've recorded episodes from so many different countries and random apartments over the years. I've interviewed incredible people and shared lessons about business while I was actively learning those lessons myself. We've talked about money, travel, entrepreneurship, mindset, relationships, manifestation, launches, failures, and everything in between, and now motherhood. And I think that's one of the biggest things this milestone is making me reflect on. We underestimate what happens when you just stay consistent and when you just keep doing something. One podcast episode doesn't feel like a big deal. One Instagram post doesn't feel like a big deal. One sale doesn't really change your entire business. But then you look back after doing something hundreds of times and realize how much all of those little things added up. I think that's true for so many areas of life, and it's something I'm appreciating more and more as I get older, the power of consistency and the power of investing your time into something for an extended period of time. Then probably the biggest life change of all happened. I became a mom. Our son Levin was born in Rio de Janeiro in February 2025. Sometimes I think about myself sitting at my corporate desk in New York and just laugh at how impossible it would have been to predict this life. I quit my job, traveled around the world, married a British surfer who I met in Bali, moved to Brazil, and then had a baby abroad with 3 citizenships. Like, life is just so funny. Motherhood has definitely changed the way I think about freedom too, because before becoming a mom, most of my decisions were about me. Where do I want to go? What do I want to do? What experience do I want to have next? But now there's this little person who I truly love more than life and who is obviously part of every single decision we make, at the forefront of every decision. Where do we want to raise him? How much time do we want together as a family? What kind of childhood do we want him to have? What countries and cultures do we want him to experience? How are we going to support him in whatever he wants to do with his life? And I actually think motherhood has made me value the life we've built even more. Having full control over our time and where we live isn't just about me getting to travel anymore. It gives us so many options as a family. I've also been thinking so much about what happens when you actually get the life you wanted and the life that you worked so hard for. I wanted to leave corporate, and I did. I wanted to travel the world, and I did. I wanted to become a creator, and I did. I wanted to be a wife and mother, and I did. And now I'm realizing that it's completely okay to want other things too. I think it's really easy to get attached to an identity you've built. And I've been the Wanderlover for almost a decade. Does that mean I need to want to travel nonstop forever? If I've spent years building an online business, does that mean that's the only thing I'm allowed to be interested in? Obviously not. Life changes, your priorities change, you get older, you learn things about yourself. And I think it's actually really exciting to let yourself explore whatever you're interested in next without any ties, without any expectations. And for me right now, one of those things is real estate. For most of my 20s, I really didn't care about owning things. I wanted experiences. I wanted to be able to fit my life into a suitcase and go wherever I wanted. But now I'm really interested in investing and building assets with everything I've worked so hard for. We're currently buying our first investment property in New York. It is a 2-family property that we're planning to renovate, and I am learning so much because this is an entirely new world for me, and we are going to do everything remotely. We've never even seen it in person. My husband used to work in construction before he started traveling full-time with me, and I've always loved interior design, so I think it is the perfect blend of our backgrounds and our interests, and it's the perfect next step for us as a family. Eventually, I'd love to own multiple multifamily properties and get into commercial real estate. I'm interested in building wealth in ways that don't rely entirely on my personal brand or my online business. And it's kind of funny because I spent years building a life where I wasn't tied to any particular place, and now I'm buying something that I literally cannot move, but I'm doing it remotely. I actually don't see those things as opposites though. Real estate is another investment and another potential source of income, and ultimately that creates even more freedom. I'm also really enjoying being a beginner again. There's so much I don't know, and I'm excited to learn and share more of that process as I go. And don't worry, we're definitely not turning into the Real Estate Lover podcast. Travel is still a huge part of our lives. We're about to leave Brazil and spend some time in the States with friends and family, and then next year we're planning to head back to Asia. I'm really excited about that because I've experienced Asia at so many different points in my life. I've been there as a student, as a backpacker, a digital nomad, and an entrepreneur, but I've never experienced it as a mom. Traveling with Levin is obviously very different from the way I traveled in my 20s, but that's also what makes life so special because there's always ways you can expand your life. Travel doesn't have to look exactly the same forever for it to still be something that you love. I think that's also where the Wanderlover is going. When I started this brand, it was very much about quitting my job, traveling the world, and creating location freedom. But today, not only does it mean time freedom, financial freedom, and location freedom, but it means doing it all sustainably for each chapter of your life. It's about building an online business, having control over your time forever, being able to spend time with my family because of what you've built, and it's choosing which country you want to live in. It's investing and building wealth. It's also having the flexibility to change my mind about what I want my life to look like at any stage and not having to be tied to one identity. So I think that's what I want to continue sharing here. The common thread isn't that everyone needs to travel full time or become a content creator or invest in real estate. It's really just being intentional about the life you design and the life you are creating. Maybe you're watching or listening to this and you're where I was when I was working in corporate. You know you want something different, but you're not totally sure what that looks like yet. Or maybe you've already built something you're really proud of, but you're starting to feel like you want something different or something else now. I think one of the biggest things I've learned is that you do not need to have your entire life mapped out. You're allowed to change your mind. You're allowed to have different chapters. You can get really good at something and decide you want to be a beginner at something else. When I left corporate, I could never have planned exactly how the next years were going to unfold. There are so many things that happen that I would have never predicted, and that's honestly kind of the fun of it. So that's where I am right now. I'm a wife, I am a mother, I'm still running the Wanderlover, I'm still creating content and traveling and coaching. We're investing in real estate, we're leaving Brazil, spending time in the States, and then hopefully heading back to Asia next year and expanding our real estate portfolio. There are a lot of different things going on, but I actually feel like they all fit together and they're all on brand. And most importantly, I have absolutely zero regrets. The way I think about freedom has definitely changed over the years. When I was younger, freedom was mostly about not being tied down. I didn't want an office, a mortgage, or someone telling me where I needed to be. But now I think it's less about avoiding commitments and more about having choices. Choosing where we live, choosing how I spend my time, choosing what businesses and investments I want to build, choosing how I want to raise my family, and choosing the lifestyle we want without finances being something that limits us. I have no idea what I'm going to be talking about when episode 600 comes around, and I'm completely okay with that. So thank you so much for being here, whether you've listened to all 300 episodes, found me somewhere along the way, or if this is literally your first. There's a lot more coming, more travel, more business, more motherhood, real estate, and probably plenty of things I haven't even thought of yet. So cheers to the next 300, and I will see you in the next one. Have an amazing week, my loves.